When a new policy gets announced or some huge project is about to break ground, how do you make sure the people who are actually affected are the first to know? Today, we're going to dig into how technology is totally changing public communication, letting organizations talk directly to the communities their decisions are going to impact. Let's get into it. And that right there is the million-dollar question for anyone working in public policy. It doesn't matter if it's a new regulation or a massive infrastructure project, the biggest challenge is always getting the right info to the right people at the right time. In a world that's already so noisy, how do you make sure your message actually gets heard? You see, a lot of big companies have entire teams dedicated to this. They're called government affairs or public policy teams. Their whole job is to talk to stakeholders and keep the public in the loop. But the old ways of doing things, like giant advertising campaigns, well, they can feel a bit like shouting into the wind. They're often inefficient, super expensive, and can totally miss the very people who need to hear the message. Right, so if that old scattergun approach isn't cutting it, what's the alternative? Well, this is where a completely new strategy comes into play: location intelligence. It's a modern solution that's designed to shift away from broad, generic messaging to something with surgical precision. So, what exactly is location intelligence? Well, to put it simply, it's technology that uses geographic data in a way that respects privacy to talk to people in a very specific place. And here's the crucial part: it's not about who you are, it's about where you are. The whole goal is geographic relevance. Now, to really bring this to life, we're going to look at a company called MapSite, and they're a perfect case study because they've already spent more than a decade sorting out super complex mapping and data problems for huge names like Visa and MasterCard, and now all that expertise is being applied to public communication. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does a company like MapSite actually build one of these location-based audiences? How does it go from a giant map of the world to a very specific, targeted message? First off, the sheer scale of the data here is, well, it's just mind-boggling. We're talking about trillions, with a T, of anonymized data points that come from mobile device pings. All of this information gets organized by their own platform called the Super Index, which is basically the engine that crunches all this raw geographic data and makes it useful. Now, you might think this sounds super complicated, but the process itself is actually pretty straightforward. It really just boils down to 3 simple steps. First, the organization picks a key geographic area. Second, they define the specific community inside that area they want to reach. And finally, the system delivers the message to the anonymous devices that are often in that location. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful framework. And this is where it gets really cool. The level of precision is just incredible. You're not just targeting a whole city anymore. You can get as specific as a voting district, a local council area, or even a thin little corridor where, say, a new railway line is being planned. You can apply this to things like event zones or pretty much any community that's going to be directly affected by some kind of change. Okay, so the theory sounds good, right? But what does this actually look like out in the real world? Let's walk through a couple of examples to see how this technology gets used for both big policy debates and for local community outreach. So let's put these side by side. On one hand, you've got something like policy engagement, maybe an industry group that needs to tell its stakeholders about a potential tax change. And on the other, you have community consultation. Think of a big company that needs to talk to residents about a new project. 2 very different goals, but they're both powered by the exact same technology. So let's take that first scenario, the regulatory change. An industry group can use this tech to run an awareness campaign. They can get information directly to the devices of local business owners, their employees, and even their customers in that specific region. And the key here, it's not about telling people what to think. It's about making sure they're informed so they have a chance to get involved in the public discussion. And now for that second example, a major new project like a mine or a highway. You know residents are going to have questions about traffic, the environment, or local jobs. This tech lets the company talk directly to those nearby residents, giving them timely info on project plans, when consultation periods are, and what the strategies are to handle any negative impacts. Okay, I know what you're probably thinking right now. This all sounds incredibly powerful, but what about privacy? Anytime you start talking about location data for mobile phones, you have to be super careful. So, how is personal data kept safe? And this quote, I think, really gets to the heart of it. The whole system isn't designed for personal profiling. It honestly doesn't care who you are. The one and only goal is geographic relevance. making sure a message about a specific place actually reaches the people who are connected to that place. So, how do they actually pull that off? Well, it's all about something called privacy by design. The system uses anonymous advertising IDs, not your personal details. The data only comes from mobile apps where people have explicitly opted in to share location data. And that means no names, no email addresses, no personal info is ever collected. Your actual identity is never known. So let's zoom out. When you put all these pieces together, what's the big picture here? It's really a fundamental shift toward much smarter, more focused public engagement. Let's wrap up with the key takeaways. For the organizations themselves, the payoff is huge. They can engage the right stakeholders way more efficiently, which means less wasted time and money on campaigns that don't hit the mark. But maybe most importantly, it lets them communicate clearly and directly with the communities that are affected, which supports real consultation and participation on a massive scale. At the end of the day, it really boils down to something simple. Public policy and big projects affect real people in real communities. This technology is just a tool that helps organizations connect with those communities in a way that's modern, accurate, and, this is the big one, designed from the ground up to respect people's privacy. And all of this leaves us with a really interesting question to chew on. As our tools for communication get this precise, how does that change our own role and our responsibility in public discussions? When you can deliver information directly to the people most affected, what could that mean for the future of civic engagement? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for sticking with me on this one.